What happened the night of AlZutt?
Islam's most trusted sources are filled with claims about Muhammad's amazing virility and sexual stamina. Muhammad was famous among his followers for being able to handle 9 or even 11 women and girls in a single night. Consider a few passages. Sahih al-Bukhari, 5068. Narrated Anas, the Prophet used to go round, have sexual relations with all his wives in one night, and he had 9 wives. Sahih al-Bukhari, 52:15. Narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet used to pass by, have sexual relation with all his wives in one night, and at that time he had 9 wives. By the way, check out the chapter heading. Whoever had sexual intercourse in the boiling, sweaty Arabian desert with all his wives and then took one bath only.
Ugh. Brother, ugh.
Try not to imagine the smell by the time he climbed on top of wife number 9. Sahih al-Bukhari, 268. Narrated Qatada, Anas bin Malik said, the Prophet used to visit all his wives in a round during the day and night, and they were 11 in number. I asked Anas, had the Prophet the strength for it? Anas replied, we used to say that the Prophet was given the strength of 30 men. And Sa'id said, on the authority of Qatada, that Anas had told him about 9 wives only, not 11. Muhammad's followers used to say that he was given the strength, the sexual strength, of 30 men. That's an oddly specific number, isn't it? The Prophet was given the strength of 30 men. An average man has no problem having sex with his wife some night. If a healthy man had 2 or 3 wives, I don't see why he couldn't have sex with 2 or 3 wives in a single evening. So why didn't Muhammad's followers say that he was given the strength of 3 or 4 men? Why 30 specifically? Fortunately for us, modern historical and anthropological researchers have solved this mystery. We now know how Muhammad received the strength of 30, count 'em, 30 men. Inspiring Philosophy sent me so many studies on this topic, I'd need the strength of 30 men just to share the highlights with you. But there's one study from psychologist Bruce Rhine that provides quite...
I don't want to ruin this for you, but this story does get a little icky, and I could ruin it and tell you the whole thing up front, but you wouldn't get the true meaning unless we actually listen to the Christian historians and actually who've done the research, who've done all the arguing with imams and looking at the previous scriptures of these clerics and again the deciphering of the Arabic nations and again looking at their historical texts like the the hadiths. Um, so we can actually find virility and a tangible evidence. Again, we're not just making these false claims. This is what they wrote down.
The overview, so I'll quote a few relevant excerpts. Let me go ahead and say, as we begin, you have no clue how common relationships between grown men and adolescent boys were in the ancient and medieval periods. You may have heard some things about ancient Greece, but this was all over the place. Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Americas. Everyone seemed to have something going on with adolescent boys. Even after the spread of Islam, for instance, this continued for centuries in the Muslim world. Mature, immature male homosexual behavior was pervasive in Islamic societies, North Africa, Western Central Asia, from 8th to 19th centuries. Mature, immature male homosexual attractions were seen as just as normal as heterosexual ones. Main interest was in boys early to mid-teens, peaking at about 14. The appeal vanished with a beard, about 16, 17. Adult men were scorned if they were passive partners. Manly behavior was to be active. Partners' gender did not matter. Staggering amounts of love poetry show an obsession with boyish beauty, seen as comparable to women's. Poets attracted to boys constitute a who's who. Desire for boys, but not behavior or lust, was permissible under Islam, but behavior was common nevertheless. This shouldn't be surprising since the Quran repeatedly entices Muslim men with the youths of paradise. Surah 52, therein they shall pass to one another a cup wherein is no idle talk, nor incitement to sin, and there wait upon them youths for them, as if they were hidden pearls. Surah 56, immortal youths wait upon them with goblets. Surah 76, immortal youths wait upon them. When thou seest them, thou wouldst think them scattered pearls. Way to get the troops fantasizing, Muhammad. Here's a description of the practice in Libya. Mature, immature, male homosexual behavior was a well-entrenched custom from antiquity to at least the 1950s. Matchmakers made marriage-like arrangements between men and adolescent boys. The boy got a gift larger than bride prices for females. Man and boy then entered into an alliance with family approval. Prominent men lent each other their sons for sex. Love affairs and jealousies over boys were common. Robin Mom said, "They will kill for a boy, never for a woman." Again, this was all over the place. But we know a bit more about how some ancient cultures
They engage in a lot of little boy sex, but apparently being gay in Islam is a sin. I'm a little understand where the contradictions, why these contradictions exist in this religion.
in Melanesia and New Guinea, for instance, thought these relationships played an extremely important role in the development of boys into men. Mature, immature male homosexual behavior was highly organized in this warrior society. Homosexual intercourse was believed essential to boys' physical and spiritual development. It supposedly transferred male power to them, implanting this in their penises, the seat of male power. The belief was that insemination grew the boys into men. At 11 or 12, a boy's father chose for him an older male to inseminate him for months or years. Some boys chose their own inseminator. Insemination was thought essential for growth. Between ages 10 and 14, boys entered a men's house after a ceremony declaring them deceased, i.e., death of childhood. They were newly born through the powerful medicine of older males' semen. Each boy acquired an adoptive father, an older male who was his mentor and regularly inseminated him, which was believed necessary to make him strong. Males lived in sex-segregated men's houses from a young age. Mature, immature male homosexual activity was pervasive. A certain kind of insemination was seen as crucial for boys' development. It began in male initiations for boys ranging in age from 7 to 14. Semen was viewed necessary for growth to be a strong warrior. So, they believed that virility and manliness could be injected into a boy by a man. There were some very strange, very disturbing ideas circulating in the ancient world, and in the 7th century, cultures were interacting and colliding because of trade. Muhammad, before he declared himself a prophet of Allah, was a caravan trader. He spent years having discussions with various people he met, and he had a tendency to believe what people told him. Even much later, long after he started preaching Islam, he was known as the ear. It's in the Quran, Surah 9, verse 61. And among them are those who torment
I apologize. This is graphic and gross.
The prophet and say he is an ear. What did they mean when they called him an ear? Ibn Asat gives the historical background. I have heard that it was of him, a man named Nabtal, that the apostle said, "Whoever wants to see Satan, let him take a look at Nabtal ibn al-Harith. He was a sturdy black man with long flowing hair, inflamed eyes, and dark ruddy cheeks." Pretty racist to say this black man looked like Satan. He used to come and talk to the apostle and listen to him and then carry what he had said to the hypocrites. It was he who said, "Muhammad is all ears. If anyone tells him anything, he believes it." And we have some commentary in the Study Quran. He is an ear is an idiomatic expression used as an insult to imply that the prophet was easily swayed by what he heard and had no resolve. Being called an ear, Al-Razi explains, is like calling a spy an eye. The accusation was that the prophet was gullible, accepting whatever he heard. According to some, there were those around the prophet who said, "We say what we wish, then we swear to him, and he believes us." So, Muhammad was known for being gullible and believing whatever people told him. This explains why he spread so many silly claims. He said that Adam was 90 feet tall, 60 cubits. He said that if a fly falls into your drink, you should dunk the fly in the drink, because one of the wings has a disease, but the other wing has the cure for the disease. He told his followers to drink camel urine as medicine. This stuff is endless in the Muslim sources. Where did this nonsense come from? Muhammad apparently just believed whatever people told him, so they called him the ear. But Muhammad had an interesting way of taking
He told some other funny stories too. Some of them they wrote down, unfortunately.
practices that were geared towards children and applying them to adults. For example, in Muhammad's time, people thought that if a woman breastfeeds a child she's not related to, the child becomes related to her. The breast milk makes the child a relative. Muhammad shocked his followers by claiming that this works even with a grown man. A grown man can absorb a woman's breast milk and become her son. Sunan an-Nasai 33:21. This is the chapter of breastfeeding an adult. And we read, Zainab bint Abi Salama said, "I heard Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, say, Sahla bint Suhail, a woman, came to the Messenger of Allah and said, O Messenger of Allah, I see displeasure in the face of Abu Hudayfa, her husband, when Salim enters upon me." Salim was a grown man. Her husband, Abu Hudayfa, didn't like a grown man being around his wife because he was worried that they might commit adultery. The Messenger of Allah said, "Breastfeed him." She said, "He has a beard." He said, "Breastfeed him, and that will take away the displeasure in the face of Abu Hudayfa." She said, "By Allah, I never saw that on the face of Abu Hudayfa after that." She breastfed a grown man with a beard, and this made the man her son. So her husband was no longer worried about his wife committing adultery with the young man
And that's how science works.
because she had put her breasts in the young man's mouth. By absorbing her breast milk, he was transformed into her son. What else can a grown man absorb? Imagine a man who's known as the ear, hearing about men injecting their manliness and virility into boys. Keep in mind, this man believes that practices that people usually apply to children also work with adults, as with breastfeeding. Suppose this man wants to become the most virile, masculine, potent man on the planet. How would he go about that? he would assemble a team of men known for their sexual prowess. And in Muhammad's time, the men who were most famous for their sexual prowess were the men of AlZutt. Historian Raymond Ibrahim explains how AlZutt are described in the Muslim sources.
According to Islam's written records, they were a migrant people from India or modern-day Pakistan, described in the sources as very tall, very dark-skinned, very lean, strong and hardy, and often used for labor-intensive work. In early Arabic ethnographies and literary works, AlZutt are also depicted as being very sexual and virile, with very large penises. In fact, according to one Arabic source, Al-Tashibbahat by Ibn Abi Awan, quote, "The penis of AlZutt never weakens," meaning their large phalluses never go limp and are ever ready. I'm sorry for the crude language, but this is what the Islamic texts say, verbatim.
Could the men of AlZutt transfer their virility and manliness into Muhammad? Let's find out by reading a now infamous hadith from Musnad Ahmed. Abdullah ibn Masud related, "The Messenger of Allah sent for me, so we set out until I reached such and such a place, and he traced a line for me and told me, 'Stay between the two edges of this. Don't go outside of it. If you go outside of it, it's over for you.'" Muhammad knew that Abdullah wasn't man enough to endure the men of AlZutt. Abdullah said, "And so I stayed there. Then the messenger..."
Now, this is the pinnacle of the story. Now, listen up. This is the story of the AlZutt.
Of Allah went off a stone's throw away, or a little farther, or something like that. Then he, Abdullah, mentioned a group of male members, Hanin, i.e. men, who looked like Zut people.
I will return.
Affan narrated, or something like what Affan said, Allah willing, "They didn't have any clothes on." You don't say. "And I didn't see their genitals, and they were tall and scrawny." He, Abdullah, said, "And they came and started to ride the Messenger of Allah, and the Prophet of Allah began to recite to them. And they started to move closer and lean around me and get in my way, and I became intensely terrified of them, so I sat down," or something like that. He sat down, thus protecting the part of him they were after. "And when the morning light broke, they began to go away," or something like that. "Then the Messenger of Allah came back exhausted and in pain, I'll bet, or practically in pain, from how they had ridden him. He said, 'Indeed, I am exhausted,' or something like that. Then the Messenger of Allah put his head in my lap," or something like that. "And the men came with tall white garments on."
Muhammad was all tuckered out.
But the Messenger of Allah had fallen asleep, and I became more intensely terrified of them than I was the first time. The men of AlZutt rode Muhammad all night long. From then on, his followers could boast that he was given the strength of 30 men. 30 men of AlZutt gathered in the desert and injected their masculinity into the Prophet of Islam, making him the most powerful man in the world. Of course, the effects might wear off after a while. Sometimes Muhammad would need to top off the tank, so to speak. That's when his companion Dihya al-Kalbi would come to the rescue. As Muhammad's companion Hudhaifa said, "The people used to enter upon the Prophet whenever they wanted. The Prophet then prohibited them from entering upon him while he was in meeting with Dihya al-Kalbi." Muhammad didn't want anyone disturbing him when he was in one of his private meetings with Dihya al-Kalbi, who, by the way, was the hottest young stud in all of Arabia. Hudhaifa continues, "One day I came to the Prophet for some matter, hoping to meet him alone. When I arrived at the door, I looked and found a curtain covering the door. I raised it and was about to enter. That's what we are accustomed to do. Then I saw Dihya sitting beside the Prophet, who was sleeping, and his head was on the lap of Dihya. When I saw that, I left." What did Muhammad do after his rough night with the men of AlZutt? He put his head on Abdullah's lap and passed out. What did he do after a meeting with Dihya al-Kalbi, he put his head on Dihya's lap and passed out. Later,
He wanted to get comfortable.
Muhammad told his followers that when they see him with Dihya al-Kalbi, it's actually the angel Gabriel. Sure, it's the angel Gabriel, conveniently disguised as Dihya al-Kalbi. And Dihya was always sure to leave his calling card. Sahih al-Bukhari, 232. Narrated Aisha, I used to wash the semen off the clothes of the Prophet, and even then I used to notice one or more spots on them. Aisha would wash the semen off his clothes. She would scratch it from his garment. She would scrape it off with her hand. Small price to pay for having such a manly husband, though, am I right? So,
Disgusting. Just disgusting stories.
we finally understand how Muhammad got the strength of 30 men. He told an elite squad of 30 men of AlZutt, known for their large penises, to meet him in the desert. He told his companion Abdullah to watch and learn from behind the ditty line. He walked about a stone's throw away and assumed the position. Then the AlZutt showed up and said, "It's Zuttin time," and zooted all over him all night long. But this gave Muhammad the stamina to have sex with 9 or 11 women and girls in a single night. So, win-win, I guess, except for the one bath part.
What's that? What's that, brother?
Now, we've solved one mystery, but another mystery remains. If relationships between men and adolescent boys were so common in the ancient world, as numerous studies have shown, why are they so surprising and disturbing to us now? What changed? The good news is that we know exactly what changed. But you'll have to click on Inspiring Philosophy's video to find
And that's that. That's the story of the AlZutt. And, honestly, I feel that a lot of this still goes on in Islam. They say this about like the Cuban mafia and shit like that. Like, there's a lot of what they call masculine men and boy love and shit. So, I mean, we used to hear it about the U.S. Marines coming back from, whatever the fucking Desert Storm. And our soldiers were put up in tents next to what we were called allies. And the men of these other tents were literally raping their boys. Just, within 30 feet, 100 feet from one tent to another tent to the U.S. Marine Corps. So, that was what, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. It's a barbarian culture. It's they look at these you know theological things instead of evidence. It's a little weird. It's a little gross. But it's surely believed by people. But other than that, yes, this is the AlZutt video, and you now know.